Without telling Joanna, I accepted an invitation from her school to attend an event. But at the event, I saw her students gathered around a guy, calling him Joanna's husband. And there she was, a smile in her eyes, gazing lovingly at him. But wait a minute, I'm her husband. Joanna's school was hosting an event and said to bring family. The invitation call came to me, which was a first. I figured it had been a while since I'd been to her school, so I cleared my schedule and said yes. Joanna works at a well-known university in our city. She's a chemistry professor there. When I got to the main gate, I called Joanna, but she didn't pick up. So, I just followed the address from the text message. The event was in a private cherry blossom garden on campus. Just as I was heading over, I saw Joanna walking ahead of me. She looked happy but also in a hurry. She kept quickening her pace, not noticing me at all. I had to speed up to follow her. About 10 seconds later, I heard someone complain. "Joanna, Oliver's been here for ages. What took you so long? Did you get lost?" Oliver was waiting so long he almost thought he was in the wrong place. "Yeah, Joanna, you're slacking on your wife duties. How could you leave your husband here waiting all alone?" I was behind Joanna, watching a bunch of students and teachers all chattering at her. "But I'm Joanna's husband. Didn't I just walk in?" What were they talking about? Following the playful teasing, I saw Oliver. He was surrounded by people, had flour on his face, and was smiling warmly at Joanna. Oh right, he's Joanna's adopted brother. I only found out she had an adopted brother after we got married. But hadn't Joanna's mom sent him abroad a few years ago? Not only was he back, but how did he end up being called Joanna's husband by everyone? I was confused, wondering if maybe they had the wrong guy. But just then, a few bold male students got up, pulled Joanna over and said, "Professor, come sit with your husband and make some pastries." Pulled along by the students, she laughed and sat down next to Oliver. I kept walking, but a male teacher stopped me. "Hello, whose family member are you?" I looked at him, then at Joanna. Just then, Joanna looked over. Our eyes met. She froze. The gentle, happy look she'd had for Oliver instantly turned to panic. But that quickly changed to coldness and annoyance. Oliver followed her gaze and looked at me too. The moment he saw me, just like Joanna, his smile vanished. He suddenly shot up. "Sorry, you guys carry on. I've got something to do, so I'm gonna head out." Without waiting for anyone to say anything, he grabbed his bag and bolted. He nearly bumped into me as he passed. Everyone was stunned. Turning to Joanna. "Oliver, what happened to him?" Joanna forced out, "Oh, don't mind him. He probably just had something come up." The male teacher asked me again, "Excuse me, which professor are you here with?" I looked at Joanna. She hurried over to me. "Sorry, Louis, he's with me." Louis went, "Oh, is he your brother?" Joanna glanced at me, then nodded guiltily. Yes, he's my brother." Then she started pulling me away. "What are you doing here?" I pulled my arm free. "What, I'm not allowed to come today." "No, it's just, if you were coming, you should have given me a heads up." I held up my phone. "Called you several times. You didn't answer." Joanna froze, then fumbled for her phone. I just watched her, not wanting to say a word. Just then, a teacher rushed in and said to Joanna, "Joanna, I just saw your husband run off crying. He fell near the man-made lake, and it looked pretty bad. You should go check on him." Joanna's phone clattered to the ground. "Nick, Oliver, he's not mentally well. Wait for me. I'll explain when I get back." With that, Joanna picked up her phone and ran out. Seeing this, the teacher who'd been greeting people looked at me, a bit lost, and invited, "Well, why don't you come join our party?" I shook my head. "No thanks. I have things to do. I'll get going." Then I added, "By the way, I'm not Joanna's brother. I'm her husband." And with that, I walked away without looking back. After leaving the event, I went to that man-made lake. From a distance, I saw Oliver on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably in Joanna's arms. Why did you marry him and not me? What does he have that I don't?" Hearing Oliver say that, I stopped dead in my tracks, staring at him in disbelief. Joanna had her back to me, gently patting Oliver's back, her voice soft and weary. Oliver, stop it. Some things aren't what you think. Oliver's eyes darted to me, filled with hatred and resentment. So what the hell is going on here? Joanna, aren't you two going to give me an explanation? Joanna whipped her head around when she heard me. Nick, what are you doing here? Shouldn't I be here? I tried to keep my voice calm, but the slight tremor at the end betrayed my emotions. Can you tell me? What exactly is this situation? Why are you parading him around in front of your colleagues, playing the happy couple? At my question, Oliver cried even harder, burying his face in Joanna's chest. As if I were the villain he couldn't get away from fast enough. Nick, please don't get upset. It's not what it looks like. We're just like brother and sister. Oliver has always been dependent on me since he was little. Maybe some of his ideas are a bit extreme. I don't want to be your brother, Joanna. I don't want to be your brother. Oliver suddenly had a meltdown, crying and shouting. Joanna patted Oliver's back. Oliver, stop it, please stop. Oliver looked up, tears streaming down his face. You don't love him, do you? Tell him. You only married him because it was practical. You never loved him, right? Joanna raised her hand and slapped Oliver, but her trembling hand betrayed her inner panic. Oliver, what are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. Joanna snapped at him, but Oliver suddenly let out a cold laugh, scrambled up from the ground, and shoved me hard. It happened so fast, I was completely unprepared. I fell, and my arm slammed hard against a sharp rock. Blood trickled down my arm, and a sharp, excruciating pain shot through me. Just then, a few teachers rushed over. Before anyone could react, Oliver started screaming and crying, pointing at me and yelling, "Homewrecker! You're a homewrecker! Ruining our love!" Then he became extremely agitated, tears bursting from his eyes. He clutched his throat, gasping for breath as if he couldn't breathe. Oliver, what's wrong? Don't scare me. Joanna didn't even glance at me on the ground. Instead, she rushed forward and hugged Oliver. Everyone looked on, completely stunned. Before anyone could process it, Oliver suddenly shoved Joanna away, turned, and with a loud splash, jumped into the man-made lake. Oliver! Joanna cried out and, without hesitation, jumped into the lake after him. My mind went blank, but I felt pain all over my body. Quick! Someone save them. The teachers on the bank scrambled to call campus security and paramedics. Someone helped me up, wanting to tend to my wound. But my eyes were glued to the lake, a storm of emotions churning inside me. After a short while, Joanna struggled to drag Oliver ashore. Oliver was shivering and coughing non-stop. Drenched herself, Joanna didn't care, anxiously checking his condition, her eyes full of worry and concern. Sorry, I need to get him to the hospital. With that, she picked Oliver up and hurried off, leaving me alone by the lake, surrounded by pointing fingers and hushed whispers. Later, I declined the teacher's kind offer and went to the hospital alone to get my arm treated. And, not surprisingly, I ran into a soaking wet, disheveled Joanna there. Doctor, how is he? Is he okay? Joanna was looking at Oliver on the hospital bed, anxiously asking a nurse. The nurse reassured her, the patient is fine, just a bit shaken up. Joanna sighed in relief, then turned and saw me. She slowly walked over to me. I'm sorry. Oliver had an episode. I have to take care of him. And what about me? I looked at her. He pushed me. I got hurt. And you just left me there? I'm sorry, Nick. Oliver is sick. I apologize for him offending you. He got too emotional. I didn't expect this to happen either. So, you just let him call himself your husband, let him call me a homewrecker, and then ditch me to take care of him? I couldn't help raising my voice, but I realized I was shaking like a leaf. Joanna frowned. Nick, don't be so aggressive. Oliver has always been insecure, and he has some mental health issues. I can't just ignore him. And what about me? I'm your husband. Have you even thought about how I feel? Nick, Just then, Joanna's phone rang. She glanced at it, and her expression became even more serious. After a moment's hesitation, she answered, Dad. I couldn't hear what was said, but Joanna's frown deepened. Then she just blurted out, "Dad, can you please stay out of it?" And she angrily hung up. "I'm sorry, Nick. I have something else to deal with. Can you just go home for now? I'll explain everything properly later." Okay. I nodded. Not because I was being obedient, but because I had more important things to do. Hearing me agree, Joanna visibly relaxed. "Nick, thank you for understanding. We'll talk at home tonight." Then, without a backward glance, she headed back towards Oliver. Later, I got my wound bandaged and went home alone. When I got home, I found my father-in-law there, which was unusual. The table was covered with all sorts of local specialties. Half were my favorites, half were things Joanna liked. Joanna's dad was the one who set us up, so he's always been pretty good to me. "Oh, Nick, you're back." Seeing me come in, my father-in-law, who had been tidying up, poked his head out of the kitchen. "Where's Joanna? Didn't she come with you?" I wasn't sure if he knew Joanna was at the hospital, so I just told him the truth. "Joanna's at the hospital. She's with Oliver." Clatter. The plate in my father-in-law's hand fell to the floor and shattered. "That damn brat. That little monster." My father-in-law was trembling, muttering to himself. "Sorry, it just slipped. I'll clean it up." He quickly snapped out of it and bent down to pick up the broken pieces. But he was clearly distracted and cut his finger on a shard. "Dad, let me get that." With one arm injured, I went to the bathroom to get a broom. No, I can do it." "You're injured." My father-in-law quickly stood up and beat me to the bathroom to grab the broom. When he came out, he asked, "Look at me so clumsy. Nick, how did you hurt your arm?" I didn't hide anything and told him everything that had happened at the school and the hospital. I saw my father-in-law's hands shaking, but he suppressed his emotions and said, "That little wretch. When she gets back, I'll give her a piece of my mind for you." I just grunted and went to the bedroom. A while later, I heard him in the kitchen, talking to Joanna on the phone. My father-in-law is hard of hearing and uses one of those old people phones with the volume cranked up. Through the closed door, I heard him yelling, "Is that snake Oliver back to charm you again? Didn't you cut ties with him? What's going on now?" On the other end, Joanna sounded very impatient. "Dad, can you not talk like that? Oliver just got back in the country, and something happened. He's in the hospital now." I knew it was him. My father-in-law's voice grew shriller. "That rotten kid from a rotten father. He was never any good, always trailing after you. Now he's back. Who knows what kind of trouble he's going to stir up? Don't you forget, you're married. Your husband is the one who's officially part of this family. Dad, can you please stop?" Joanna cut him off, annoyed. "It's been so many years. Why can't you just let him be?" Her father roared, "If I let him be, who's going to let me be? All these years, your mother betrayed me, and now you're betraying me. You two are cut from the same cloth. I'm telling you, get your ass back here right now. Otherwise, I won't let Oliver off the hook." "Dad, Oliver's mental state is really bad right now. He even jumped into the lake earlier. I can't just abandon him." "He jumped in a lake?" My father-in-law scoffed. "He jumps in a lake. But why push Nick down first? Sounds to me like he's just faking it, playing dumb. And you, the moment something happens with him, you lose your head and abandon your own husband. Is that any way to act? Dad, can you please not make things worse?" Joanna's voice was clearly impatient. "I can handle things with Nick myself. Just stay out of it." Then, ignoring her father's yelling on the other end, she hung up. But soon my phone rang. It was Joanna. I answered, and Joanna's tired voice came through. "Nick, I'm really exhausted right now. Please stop involving Dad in our problems. Can we just talk about it when I get back? Please don't push me anymore." "I'm pushing you?" I gave a bitter laugh. "From the moment this started until now, have you asked me once if I'm okay? Do you even care about this family, about me?" Joanna was silent. After a long pause, she said quietly, "If you feel so wronged, then let's just get a divorce." This was the first time Joanna had ever said anything like that. But I could hear the seriousness and determination in her voice. So I replied, "Okay, fine. Monday is 2 days from now. We can file then. We can sort out other things during the 30-day cooling off period." The other end of the line suddenly went silent. After a long moment, Joanna just grunted an and hung up. My father-in-law put the local specialties in the fridge, made me some soup, and called me out to have some. Ever since that call with Joanna, he'd been distracted. As if he sensed something, while I was drinking my soup, he said, "Nick, promise me you'll try to make things work with Joanna." I slowly sipped the soup. "Thanks, Dad. The soup is delicious. But life isn't like drinking soup, where one person can just drink it and be done." My father-in-law understood what I meant and didn't try to persuade me further. He just sighed. In the end, it's Joanna who's being foolish. Later, my father-in-law rambled on a bit more and then brought up an old story about his own past loves and heartbreaks. And after hearing it all, I was simply stunned, rooted to the spot. It turned out that Oliver's biological father was a man named Alex. When Oliver was 13, his stepfather, a gambling addict, died in a car accident. Joanna's mother and Alex were childhood sweethearts. Years before the stepfather's death, Joanna's mother had sent Alex abroad to help Alex escape gambling debts left by Oliver's maternal grandfather. After Oliver's stepfather died, and with Alex presumably still abroad, Oliver eventually came to live with Joanna's family when he was young. My father-in-law, out of pity for the boy, officially adopted him and treated him like his own son. Back then, 15-year-old Joanna was in her prime and enthusiastically looked after Oliver as her younger brother. But when Oliver turned 18, things suddenly changed. Alex, who had been abroad for years, suddenly returned and rekindled his affair with Joanna's mother. It was only then that my father-in-law learned the full truth, that Alex's earlier disappearance was Joanna's mother sending him away, and that they had maintained secret contact all those years. Joanna's mother had even used work as an excuse to go abroad and be with Alex every year. After learning the truth, my father-in-law got sick from the shock and anger. Once he recovered, he caused a huge scene, insisted on a divorce, and they ended up in court fighting over assets. So, Oliver hadn't been kicked out by Joanna's father. He had initially left the country with his own father, Alex, when Alex was first sent away by Joanna's mother. Ultimately, what goes around comes around. Joanna's mother, obsessed with Alex, was determined to get divorced. But during the divorce proceedings, while she was with Alex at his apartment, they both died in a gas explosion. After their deaths, Oliver, with nowhere else to go, came back begging my father-in-law for help, but he was thrown out. Oliver didn't give up and started pestering Joanna. He confessed his love for Joanna outright, saying that after all those years by her side, he had unknowingly fallen for her. Even though Joanna clearly rejected him, he ignored it, constantly engineering chance meetings and frequently appearing in her life. Joanna, as if she'd lost her mind, went behind her father's back and secretly gave Oliver financial support. Completely disregarding her father's feelings, she was solely focused on protecting Oliver. Eventually, my father-in-law laid down the law. If Joanna chose Oliver, she would lose him as her father. Only then did Joanna finally give in and send Oliver abroad. But unexpectedly, Oliver came back again. Hearing all this, I was just filled with a sense of absurdity and shock. These complicated and melodramatic events were far more outrageous than I could have ever imagined. After telling me all this, my father-in-law sat on the sofa, hands clasped on his knees, and began to speak uncomfortably, his voice thick with guilt. "Son, I've done you wrong. All these years, I've kept these things hidden in my heart, a heavy burden weighing me down, making it hard to breathe. But I kept hoping things would slowly get better, so I kept it from you." He paused, his eyes welling up with tears. "I initially just wanted Joanna and Oliver to cut ties completely. But that boy, he was like a shadow she couldn't shake, always clinging to Joanna. Before you came along, I truly believed there was no chance for her and Oliver, which is why I set you two up. I truly didn't expect. I'm so sorry, Nick. I'm so sorry. It's my fault you're in this mess. If I had known things between you and Joanna would turn out like this, I never should have dragged you into this whole disaster." Hearing my father-in-law's words, I felt the world spin, and my body swayed uncontrollably. Joanna and I met at a hospital. My parents divorced and remarried when I was young, so my grandmother raised me. When she got sick, I dedicated myself to taking care of her at the hospital. At that time, my grandmother and Joanna's father were in the same hospital room. I first met Joanna on a weekend. She was wearing a simple blouse and pants, tall and slender, with rimless glasses perched on her nose. She looked sharp and put together. Walking into the room, she first greeted her father softly, then politely nodded to me and said, "Hello. Thank you for looking after my dad during this time." Her cool yet gentle voice and unique aura immediately captivated me. Later, Joanna's father and I got to know each other better. He often praised me for taking such meticulous care of my grandmother. One day he took my hand, smiled, and asked, "Young man, are you seeing anyone?" I blushed and shook my head. His eyes lit up instantly. "My daughter, Joanna, you've met her. She's a university professor, a very down-to-earth person. How about I introduce you two properly?" Hearing this, I felt a flutter of nervousness and excitement. I already had a good impression of Joanna, and after learning she was a university professor, my admiration grew into respect. After all, I hadn't done well in school, barely got a bachelor's degree, struggled to find a job, and ended up running a small bookstore. Compared to her, the gap was enormous. Later, Joanna's father enthusiastically played matchmaker, and we started seeing more of each other. But every time we met, Joanna was very polite, always keeping a distance, her courtesy bordering on coldness. Still, I was secretly happy and cherished every opportunity to be with her. Maybe she couldn't refuse her father, or maybe she truly felt it didn't matter who she married, but eventually we got together. This was during the last year of pandemic restrictions, when things hadn't fully opened up. Joanna said that due to school regulations, they couldn't hold a large wedding banquet at that time. So we just registered our marriage and had a simple dinner with close friends from both families. Married life was calm and uneventful. Joanna remained her usual lukewarm self, using the excuse of keeping her personal and professional life separate. She never introduced me to her colleagues or students. But because I loved her, I never complained, just did my best to take care of her and keep our little home in perfect order. But now, the rose-colored glasses have shattered, and I truly understand that old saying. Goes to show, a fancy education doesn't make you a good person. Looking back at all the little moments after our wedding, what I once thought was warmth and sweetness now shattered like a soap bubble, leaving only endless irony. I always believed marrying Joanna was a blessing from heaven, the greatest fortune of my life. Who knew it would turn out to be such an utterly absurd abyss? It seems Joanna only married me to appease her father. She's so hypocritical, so disgusting. I don't know when my father-in-law left, because I truly didn't know what to make of it all anymore. The nausea and resentment in my chest reached a boiling point. It all came spewing out when Joanna got home. The moment Joanna walked in and looked at me, I clapped my hand over my mouth and ran to the bathroom to throw up. So disgusting, absolutely disgusting. How can such disgusting, shameless people exist in this world? I was hunched over the toilet, throwing my guts up. In that moment, I suddenly realized there would be no amicable split with Joanna. Not in this lifetime. When I finally managed to calm down and came out of the bathroom, Joanna was waiting at the door, looking like she wanted to say something. That wave of nausea hit me again, and I clapped my hand over my mouth and rushed back to the bathroom. Joanna seemed to misunderstand, running over and asking, Are you sick?" I cut her off. "Shut up. Get out. You're what's making me sick." Thankfully, I wasn't seriously ill. I was just purely sickened by Joanna. After I came out of the bathroom, Joanna looked at me with a grave expression. After a long pause, she said, "Don't say things you don't mean. If you're really not feeling well, go see a doctor. I won't divorce you. Can you just get lost? The sight of you makes me sick." That night, Joanna went back to the bedroom, and I went straight to the guest room to sleep. Early the next morning, when I got up, Joanna was in the kitchen making porridge. Seeing me, she held up a ladle and said, "I saw Dad brought over ingredients you like yesterday, so I made you some porridge. Have some." I didn't even want to talk to her. I got ready as quickly as possible and went to a well-known law firm. But after the consultation, I found out Joanna and I didn't have many joint assets. and I had no concrete proof of her cheating. If we divorced, I'd only get my share of the property division. That wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to my 3 years of emotions, to the genuine heart I'd put into this. Because of this, I lost my trust in people, and my understanding of love was shattered. Why should she get off scot-free, leaving me to tear myself apart? I couldn't be magnanimous and understanding, nor could I part amicably. I'm stubborn by nature, and I believe in an eye for an eye. After leaving the law firm, I first contacted a private investigator, then went to the hospital to get my injuries officially documented. Then I went to Joanna's university, got the security footage of Oliver pushing me from the day before, and reported it to the police. At the police station, I saw Oliver and Joanna, who was with him. Oliver's eyes were red-rimmed, and when he saw me, he cowered behind Joanna. I paid him no mind and just asked the officer to detain him. Joanna frowned at me. "Nick, it was just a small scuffle. Did you really need to drag it to the police station?" I lifted my bandaged arm. "Yeah, well, you're not the one who got hurt, so your words mean nothing but hot air." Then, completely ignoring her, I handed the injury report and video to the officer. "I'm not interested in settling. Please handle this accordingly." Oliver suddenly started sobbing. "Joanna, I really didn't mean to. I was just too upset." Joanna patted him. "It's okay, don't be afraid. I'll handle it." Oliver leaned into Joanna's arms, glaring daggers at me. Just then, the officer, after reviewing all the materials, said, "Based on the current evidence, Mr. Oliver's act of pushing and injuring someone is established. According to public security laws, this warrants administrative detention. As for compensation, both parties can negotiate. If an agreement can't be reached, the injured party can file a civil suit in court." Hearing about detention, Oliver panicked, desperately clinging to Joanna, his eyes wide with fear. Joanna also looked at me. "Nick, whatever is between us, let's settle it privately. Please don't make things hard for Oliver. Okay?" I shook my head. "No." Seeing my firm stance, Oliver yelled at me viciously. "It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, Joanna and I would have been together long ago. We'd be so happy. You're just a homewrecker, destroying our love." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're the one who meddled in my marriage with Joanna, and now you're twisting things around. People like you, who knowingly become the other person, are truly hopeless. Remember, this is just the beginning of your lesson. I'll make you 2 despicable dogs pay for what you've done." Joanna frowned, fuming, about to say something to me. I cut her off, saying coldly, "You scum, parading your adopted brother around at a school event, introducing him as your husband in front of everyone. Aren't you disgusting? This sick game you're playing with your brother is still twisted. You idiot." "Nick, what are you talking about?" Joanna was trembling with anger. "I'm talking about you, obviously. Beast in human disguise? You're all beast, no disguise." Then I turned back to the officer. "Officer, I'm not settling this. This homewrecker has pushed me too far. Please proceed as you see fit." The officers had seen their share of drama and nodded. "All right, we understand." Later, Oliver was gifted with 3 days in detention and a $500 fine. It wasn't much, but it felt damn good. After leaving the police station, Joanna caught up to me. "Nick, why do you have to be like this? If you don't want to divorce me, then we won't. Can you just stop making a scene?" I stopped, turned, and slapped Joanna across the face. "Not divorce? You think I want to keep you around to make me sick every day?" With that, I walked off without looking back. I spent that whole day out, preparing materials. On Monday, instead of going to the courthouse with Joanna for the divorce, I went straight to her university. On the way, I started a live stream. Even though I just run a bookstore, I'd gained 20 or 30,000 followers from my regular book sharing live streams. It wasn't a huge number, but it was enough to cause a stir. During the stream, I told everyone about Joanna and Oliver. Once people understood the whole story, they were outraged, cursing them out. When they found out I was going to the university to demand accountability, they cheered me on, eagerly waiting to see what would happen. Soon, hundreds of thousands of people flooded into my live stream. Most people were supportive, Go for it, brother. Expose her. Don't let yourself be wronged. Backing down is for losers. Tolerating this is worse. Go raise hell, man. Others tried to dissuade me. Come on, man. Just let it go. Making a scene in public like this isn't good, you'll lose face. Don't go. Relationship stuff doesn't need to get this ugly. Leave each other some dignity. Reply to the above, what? The cheating bitch didn't care about her husband's dignity when she was with her adopted brother. But now he's supposed to preserve hers? What kind of pathetic lowlifes are you? The two sides started arguing, and several comments got deleted. Of course, there were neutral ones too. Brother, whatever you decide, remember to protect yourself. Don't let your emotions control you. I typed, okay, thanks for your concern, everyone. When I got to Joanna's university, I first went to her department office and loudly confronted the dean. When you organize events, why don't you verify faculty family members? How can you let a teacher bring a homewrecker to an event? Is this an oversight by your school, or is this standard practice? Why was everyone calling that homewrecker Joanna's husband? And where does that leave me, her actual husband? My voice was so loud it attracted a crowd of students. The dean wanted to have me dragged out, but I held up my phone and said, I'm live streaming. Touch me if you dare. Later, a male teacher came to try and calm me down. I recognized him as the teacher who had been greeting family members that day, the one who offered to take me to the hospital. With his mediation, I stopped shouting, but I insisted the school give me a proper explanation. The dean couldn't handle it and, with a dark face, called Joanna. Joanna came running, all flustered. She was sweating profusely, her hair stuck to her face, looking a complete mess. Seeing me live streaming with my phone, her eyes filled with disbelief, as if she couldn't believe I'd take things this far. She rushed forward and grabbed my arm. Nick, let's talk about this at home, okay? Don't make a scene here. I struggled hard and pulled my arm free. Why talk at home? Let's clear this up right here. You brought your adopted brother to the event, let everyone call him your husband, and then told your colleagues I was your brother. What the hell was that about? If you two wanted to play your sick incest game, why didn't you say so sooner? Why drag an innocent man like me into it? The viewers on the live stream exploded. The screen filled with accusations and curses aimed at Joanna. Just then, someone in the live chat commented, I recognize her. That's Professor Joanna from our school. I once saw her holding hands with a guy on campus. We all knew him as Oliver, and she never corrected people when they assumed he was her partner. But that guy isn't her husband at all. Thinking about it now, it's truly disgusting. As soon as this comment appeared, it instantly triggered a wave of agreement from others. The students around me watching the live stream also noticed this comment. They had been merely curious onlookers, but now their gazes towards Joanna were filled with growing contempt and disgust, and their whispering grew louder. How can there be a teacher like this? She has no professional ethics. And I used to think she was a good lecturer. I was so wrong about her. Joanna's face flushed red hearing these comments. She reached for me again, trying to pull my arm. Nick, let's talk at home. What good does making a scene here do for you? I slapped her hand away and said to the camera, Folks, she's still trying to sweep this under the rug, still trying to evade responsibility. Today, I'm here to demand an explanation. The school must give me an answer. Her behavior can't just be brushed aside. The dean's face was as black as soot, and he kept urging Joanna to resolve the situation quickly. That male teacher was still trying to ease the tension. Let's all calm down, sit down, and talk this through. There's always a solution. But my mind was made up. I declared to everyone, if I don't get a satisfactory explanation today, I absolutely will not let this go. Joanna stood frozen, her expression a complex mix of anger, shame, and mostly helplessness. Suddenly, Joanna clenched her fists, veins bulging on her forehead. Nick, everything you're doing right now is pure revenge. You used to be kind and gentle, but now, you're like a vengeful madman, stopping at nothing. Her words made me laugh, a laugh full of sorrow. A vengeful madman? Joanna, do you still not understand what you did wrong? It was your selfishness and greed that completely buried the kind person I used to be. Everything I'm doing is just to protect my dignity and rights. What's wrong with that? Joanna opened her mouth, and after a moment, managed to say, "There's nothing going on between Oliver and me. He's just sick and emotionally unstable. I was only taking care of him. Oh, and that care just naturally led to kissing, right?" With that, I pulled out several photos taken by the private investigator and threw them on the table. Those photos showed Joanna holding the back of Oliver's head, kissing him passionately. Oh my God, that's disgusting. I'm gonna puke. I get it now. A scumbag woman will never admit her mistakes. She'll just make all sorts of excuses until the proof comes out. Good thing the streamer was smart and got evidence beforehand. Otherwise, he'd really be screwed without a word. The live chat was scrolling rapidly. Someone must have reported it because the stream got banned. So, I put away my phone and said to Joanna, "Let's get these divorce papers signed. Fast. Otherwise, I'm going to be sick." 2 months later, I successfully got my divorce certificate. I don't even want to talk about the drama that happened in between. But I didn't lose out. I got more money from the house and car than I expected. As for Oliver, after his stint in detention, he calmed down a lot. He still cursed me out daily, but he didn't dare get physical anymore. And Joanna, because of this whole affair, was forced to resign by the university. Joanna's father disowned her too. They cut off all ties. He had said it long ago. If Joanna chose Oliver, she couldn't have him as a father. Now that Joanna had chosen Oliver, he naturally didn't want her as his daughter anymore. Later, I heard that Joanna and Oliver had a lot of conflicts and eventually had a falling out. Joanna tried to make Oliver stop bothering her, but he wouldn't listen. He even got Joanna drunk, and she ended up pregnant with his child. Later, they had no choice but to get married. They just got a marriage certificate, no ceremony or reception. Later on, I met my current wife, Wendy. She's a sharp-tongued CEO who always had a stern face and kept asking me to deliver books to her upstairs office. We kind of got off on the wrong foot, and our relationship had its own twists and melodramatic turns, but I won't get into the details. Anyway, in the end, she started clinging to me every day after work. Sometimes we'd bicker, other times she was like a big, playful puppy. Later, when I was accompanying Wendy to a prenatal checkup, we ran into Joanna and Oliver at the hospital. Joanna, once so impeccably dressed, had been worn down by life, looking disheveled and unkempt. Oliver was stamping his feet, yelling and screaming at her about something. I heard Oliver say, "If you hadn't been so irresponsible when you were pregnant with her, drinking all that alcohol, would our child be intellectually disabled?" Joanna yelled back, "How is that my fault? It's because of you. You're incompetent, always getting tangled up with other people. Don't think I don't know. After your divorce, you were always secretly looking at Nick's photos and shouting his name when you got drunk. Tell me, are you still in love with him?" Hearing this, Wendy beside me got upset and bristled. That damn idiot. Why is she so annoyingly persistent? But just then, Oliver's sharp eyes spotted me. "Nick, you bastard. What are you doing here?" Before I could say anything, Wendy beside me snapped viciously, "Say one more word against my husband, and I'll rip your mouth apart." Oliver burst into tears and slapped Joanna. "Are you even human? Your husband is being insulted, and you're not saying a word. Don't you have any backbone?" Joanna ignored him, her eyes fixed on me. She looked at me, at my wife, and at my wife's pregnant belly. After a long moment, she said, "Congratulations," then turned and left, holding her child. Wendy beside me piped up, "Why'd she run off like that?" I was planning to punch her one. I playfully punched her first. "What are you trying to do, start trouble?" No. With you here, hubby, I wouldn't dare." On the way back, I gazed out the car window, and everything that had happened flashed through my mind like scenes from a movie. I suddenly remembered a saying, "What's life if you don't go through some crap? As long as it doesn't kill you, you can always start over. Matters of the heart are like drinking water, only you know if it's cold or warm. But you must always keep a clear head, always love yourself, and always keep your passion alive."